We talked about the apps that are available from King County, their system of notification. The police department had the Explorer Scouts go around about 3 weeks ago, and they put papers on the houses, mostly on the other side of the railroad tracks up to about 3rd Avenue, giving you an opportunity to sign up with the City of Pacific. We have access to a robocall system. If we have your phone numbers, we can keep you informed as to what's going on. The city has established 3 different levels. The first level is when we're at the 5,000 to 6,000 CFS range. That's the point at which the Corps of Engineers is going to send people out to start watching the rivers. You need to start being aware, and there's things that you can do. You can start moving some of your furniture and more valuable things to higher elevation so that in case the worst situation happens, some of your personal items will be protected. The next phase is about 8,000 CFS, and that's when it is topping over the bank. This is when you need to be prepared to start possibly moving and going someplace else. And at the 3rd level, where we can call and notify you, is when we do have flooding in the city and you really need to evacuate. And that's, when I was introducing our partners, I failed to mention probably one of the more important ones, and that's Valley Regional Fire Authority, because when it's time to evacuate town, they're going to be very important in helping us get the word out to people. The police department will go through with cars and loudspeakers and let people know in addition to the phone call, but if we don't have your phone numbers, we won't be able to notify you. And VRFA will help us go door to door to make sure that that happens. So talk about the robocall system, police address, and VRFA. So what can you prepare? What can you do to prepare? The first thing is to have a plan. If flooding occurs, where will you go if you have to evacuate? It's better to be prepared in advance and know where you might go. If you've got friends, family, have that plan in place. Notify them so that they know that there's a possibility of flooding. I may have to go someplace else. Figure out what items do you need to move to higher ground. Have a plan on how you can get that done. Have an emergency evacuation route. If flooding occurs and it starts to come at the south end of Butte, then you'll need to go north to 3rd, and that'll have to be your route. But if you've got early enough notification, leave early enough in the process, you can go down to Stewart Road and evacuate that way. And then have supplies. Make sure that you've got some of your medications ready to go, and other important things that if you have to leave quickly, you'll be ready to go. How do you stay informed? Well, we talked about the various phone apps that are available. The city's website has information posted on a regular basis. Channel 21, we put notifications up there, so there's another form of information. And old-fashioned, talk to your neighbors. Sometimes, in this day and age, we got Facebook and Twitter. Sometimes we don't talk to people, but talk to your neighbors. Make sure that they've signed up so that they can get notifications from the city. We try to reach everybody, but we can't, and we need neighbors reaching out to neighbors to help us make that happen. This time, we're going to open up to questions. Yes, sir.
I have a question for 2 complexes. One is the main court, and the other is the reception department, which is the office over there.
Okay.
Is there any possibility that that water around the barrage can go underneath the railroad tracks over there and still get into here? And then also, how is and 32nd Street over there, which is just up the river pretty good, is that in danger at all, or they can take care of that over there?
I'll let you address what's going on in Auburn, because anything on the other side of the railroad track is in Auburn. I don't know what their plans are out there. Our plan, as far as Megan's Court is concerned, is we're raising that whole HESCO barrier all the way to the railroad track, and we'll seal it off there with some extra sandbags as necessary so that we can monitor. We do not anticipate water getting on this side, the city side of those HESCO barriers. We're making every effort we can to prevent that from happening.
I understand the plan to use the east side of the river, that's where you get flooding. How's some of that?
Your setback.
So that's called the County Line Levee Setback Project, and we're targeting a 2015 construction of that project. Right now, we've completed about a 60% design level. It's relatively detailed design, and we started to submit for some of the environmental permits. So we're going through that process.
Yes.
In 2009, when we had that flood, water was coming up through the storage drain on 3rd Avenue, and that's been fixed to where when the flooding don't come up.
There's several storm drains in the park that have actually been blocked off, so the water cannot come through the park back to the other side of those barriers. And we're trying to locate all those. There's some up on 3rd Place Southeast, and we will do similar measures up there.
Yeah, because that's where the water came through, and then it ran down through between the mobile home and back to the park again.
And we've got measures in place to block those lines off as well. We've got those large, look like a giant marshmallow, that we can set right on top of those basins that will seal them off. We usually put some fabric, plastic type fabric between the grate and the frame of the basin, and then we can put the large sandbag on top, and that puts a fairly tight seal there.
Is that what you've done down the library or State Drive towards the river there? Because I know something about walking today, that she said underneath some of those drains.
That is filter fabric to prevent silt and sediment from getting into the storm drainage system. When they're all through with the construction, the last thing we do is we'll sweep the street, and then those get removed so that the catch basins go back and function as they normally would. Yes?
During that flood and stuff, over by the railroad track and the bridge there, it really catches all the stuff going down the river there. And between Will and
The wood debris, there's limitations on what can be done. There are measures that do take place to remove what can legally be removed. That's the trouble.
You're referring to the 8th Street Bridge, and there's a pier in the middle of the river channel that collects wood. And the city of Auburn owns that bridge, and they maintain it. And in the past, they've gotten permits to remove wood from those bridge piers. And down on 8th Street in Sumner, City of Sumner owns the 8th Street Bridge, and it has 2 piers in the channel. And they also have a permit in place in case they want to remove wood from the piers because of flooding.
Yes.
So assuming you got some big projects going, but what is the cost of being, that, I just want to know what the cost is going to be.
Actually, the cost of this is, the city is not really paying for any of this. It's part of there's a flood control district established. Part of the property taxes fund that flood control district, and those monies are used to construct these types of projects.
Is there anything we can do to help out? I mean, is there any more walkthroughs or?
I really appreciate you asking that question, because I think the best thing that you all can do is to be prepared yourself. Get information, call the King County Flood Warning Center, sign up for the robocall, stay informed, and be prepared. And, I think Jim's point about talking to your neighbors, if you have neighbors that might need a little bit extra help or check on each other, that's really what you can do, and keep an eye out, because I tell you, when we get into flood events across King County, we rely on our road crews. These guys that are out here building stuff right now, they're covering a lot of bases. communities. So, the best thing the citizens can do is be prepared, know the river system, and be watchful. And if you need to, you know, get to someplace safe, that's what we really need to do. So I really appreciate that question.
I asked questions that somebody came in tonight, and I believe the answer that you gave me to this question was this. The reason that we are gathered here this evening is we do have some serious concern about what we might face later on with.
Yeah, I'm going to refer back to the little drawing that Jeannie had up there where she was showing the cross-section of the river and how the sediment is built up. That's the story. The capacity of the river is less, and the volume of water isn't changing. And there's a large basin that the Mud Mountain Dam is trying to protect. There's probably 500,000 people that live in that basin. There's all the property and lives. And when they operate that dam, they have to do it for maximum retention of life and property. And unfortunately, where the river is, what happens is the river comes down from that dam and it flattens out right here in the Pacific. And so as it flattens out, all the gravel and sediment slows down, starts to settle down, and fill in the river channel instead of keep moving down to Sumner. We'd love to ship it down to Sumner. Unfortunately, the river slows down and it drops out here. So when it does that, the capacity of the river is decreased. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I own the property, right, just downriver from the bridge that you're talking about. And I owned it for 18 years now. I've got some neighbors that have owned it much longer. I've never had any flooding problems. But the buildup up in the river has been evident since I bought it in 1995. I'm just kind of curious as to why now you're coming along to say that you want to put a 4-foot barricade up to block my view, and it's going to take you 5 years to solve the problem. Such a big problem. Why aren't you out there fixing it right now? I just, the fact that you lowballed me on the buyout, and then when I didn't take the buyout, now you're going to try to block my view. This is harassment by the county, and I'm really kind of getting tired of this property owner. And as a lifelong Washingtonian and a certified Washington pioneer, this is just, I'm sorry. I never expected the government to treat me this way. And that's what they're doing. Thank you. Everybody should be applauding this room if you know what the county is trying to do to your property values here. They're trying to lowball me, and then when I refuse to buy, they said they're going to put up a barricade to block my view, which is the value of the property is a view. So, I don't know. I just want to make everybody aware of that. I hope this goes on the news. I really do. That's the King County trying to screw the average taxpayer. They came to me saying, this is all we can afford to buy out your property, even though it's way under what the tax value is. And oh, by the way, this is all we're going to give you for your property, and if you don't, now we're going to mess with you even more by blocking your view and taking away the value of your property. This is the kind of thing that Jesse got on TV is all about. So hopefully he'll leave.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for hearing me. No response. I didn't expect that.
Why is that build up non-linear?
So I want to do a couple other introductions here. Mike Field is from the Corps of Engineers. You're probably going to see him as one of the river spotters this year. And I also want to introduce Chris Brummer. Chris is on my staff and knows a lot about sediment. And I think he can probably answer it.
So you're probably referring to this graph here that just shows the buildup. So some years there's more water, higher peak flows in the river. And so you ask why is it non-linear, meaning not, the same every year. And if the higher the flows, the more sediment it's transporting. And then when it hits the lower gradient here, it drops out the sediment. So we have a period of time where 2006, 2007 we had some big flows. and 2009, bigger flows as well. So it just carried more sediment those years, and then the last 2 years, we've been kind of lucky, we haven't had any big flows. But, you know, it gets over about 4,000 CFS, and it can transport the gravel anyway, and still deposits it. So it just depends on the peak flows we have.
Barbara?
How deep is the river, like right now, going through Pacific? I know right now it's kind of low, maybe it's not as rapid.
Yeah, I think the river flow today was only about 500 CFS. So when you say how deep is the river, I mean, some of these pools can be several feet deep at this flow, and then it shallows out. I don't think there's just one answer for that. What is your concern about your question? I want to try to understand. Just understand.
Yes, ma'am.
Why? I go out for walks each day, I always walk through the park and all that, and I wonder, why don't you, every so many years, get a dredger in here and dredge out that channel and build up the levees the whole way around? I've had 2 or 3 responses from a former mayor, and to be honest with you, it was a lot of BS.
In the 1980s, they did that regularly. I used to live by the Puyallup River, and they would put it out to bid, like gravel contractors, whoever the low bidder was, or actually, I guess it was the high bidder in that case, because they were paying money back to the county. Unfortunately, regulations changed. The river is spawning ground for fish, and so environmental regulations actually do not permit the removal of the gravel.
You know, I heard that about spoiling the fish and about the Indians having something to do with it and blah, blah, blah. But I have yet to see on all my trips through that dock along there, any fish whatsoever come in, any fishermen along those banks from here to Timbuktu, ever.
It's closed.
So to me, that is an excuse.
I feel like,
They're there.
They're there.
and big one. Really? Yeah.
I have not never seen one.
Ma'am?
I don't know, is that estimated, that's where our window is made for all 4 seasons? Or is it pretty much, yeah, it's about 4+ hours, and it's any road, it's a run on here now.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I have a question, and I understand, the family and the house that there, that, was down Sam, Jack. But, what was the population, say, 10, 15 years ago?
Of Pacific?
No, not specific.
Oh, the whole basin?
Population that they're protecting.
It was probably, I would estimate, about maybe 2/3 to half of what it is today.
So basically, they increased the building, and so they increased the population, now they have to protect the population, and it's Pacific suffering because they have to protect the greater population.
Well, it's the cities within that have allowed that development to occur,
Right.
you know, and again,
Couldn't the Corps of Engineers say, because part of building too, you have to take down trees. When you take down trees, then trees can absorb water.
that's
And
correct.
if you take trees down, there's nothing to absorb the water. So now you've got a greater, cubic feet of water coming through the tributary.
That's true.
Well, maybe a little bit more about the Mud Mountain Dam. As I mentioned, they try to control the releases from the dam to about 12,000 cubic feet per second. The dam was in place in 1948. That's when it started to control flows. Prior to that, I think the flood of record was 28,000 cubic feet per second before the dam. So as much as we can think about how the system works, having that facility upstream has really provided a lot of good flood control benefits. Now, the other thing that we talked about is being prepared. And just to point out, that 12,000 cubic feet per second is when feasible. They actually have congressional authorization to release up to 17,600 cubic feet per second. If they had to save the dam and not have it overtop, because you have 28,000 or 30,000 cubic feet per second coming into that reservoir, it can only hold so much, and you need to release it downstream. It's the only dam for all three rivers, Puyallup, Carbon, and White. The Puyallup and Carbon don't have dams on them to control flood flows. So the way that the Corps operates the dam is they try to hold water in Mud Mountain. The Puyallup and Carbon rivers, their flood peak comes up and starts to pass, and then they let water out from the White. And that's how they're trying to reduce flood damages as much as they possibly can. And the trick of that is if you get two back-to-back storms. You get two pineapple expresses, or now they call them atmospheric rivers. So here comes this big storm, it comes in, they're controlling the dam, and then we have about a 7 or 10 day outlook. Here comes another storm event. That's the scenario where you have to be prepared, because the dam can only do so much. And I'm sure the Corps of Engineers, operators, they think about this probably 24 hours a day, all through the flood season, and I know that they'll do their best, they have. But that's the kind of scenario that you have to watch out for, that back-to-back storm event.